Patrick Kennedy is standing on a dock in County Wexford, and he is 30 years old, and he is never coming back. The year is 1848, and he is not alone on this dock, not even close. In this single decade, the 1840s, over 1 million Irish people will make this same decision. Get on a boat, leave everything. Because the alternative is standing in a country that is, in the most literal sense possible, starving to death around them. 3 years earlier, in the autumn of 1845, something arrived in Ireland that nobody had a name for yet. A blight, a water mold called Phytophthora infestans that moved through potato fields like a rumor. Invisible, airborne, unstoppable. You couldn't see it coming. You couldn't smell it until it was already done. Farmers who walked their fields on a Monday morning and found everything green and healthy would come back Friday to find the stalks black and collapsed. The potatoes underneath dissolved into a gray, a stinking rot that got into the soil and the air and stayed there. This mattered in a way that is hard to overstate if you don't know what the potato meant to Ireland. 1 acre of potatoes fed a family for a year. That's not a metaphor. That's the arithmetic of survival for roughly 1/3 of Ireland's population. 8.5 million people living on an island where the land was owned almost entirely by English landlords, and the Catholic Irish who worked it had no rights, no recourse, and no margin. The potato was the margin. It was the one crop that grew abundantly enough on a small enough plot that a family with nothing could eat. When it failed, not once, not twice, but 5 years in a row, there was nothing underneath it. People ate grass, they ate the bark off trees. They walked miles to workhouses that were already so overcrowded with the dying that the staff had stopped pretending they could help everyone. 1 million people, 1 in 8, died, not in a war, and not in a plague, from hunger. On an island that was, the entire time, exporting food to England because the landlords needed their rent paid, and the British government believed, with total philosophical conviction, that the market would sort itself out. It did not sort itself out. And so Patrick Kennedy is on this dock. He is a barrel maker. He has a trade, a wife named Bridget, a 3-year-old son. 1 bag between them containing everything worth carrying, which is not much. Behind him, a village that has been coming apart for 3 years. Houses standing empty with doors open, a priest burying people too fast to say the words right. Neighbors he has known his whole life, simply gone. The ship in front of him, everyone on this dock knows what people call these ships. He gets on anyway, because he has a 3-year-old son looking up at him. Because the ground itself has failed. Because 1 million Irish people in this decade will make this same calculation, and the ones who don't, many of them will not survive it. What waited for them on the other side, what America did to these people, and what these people did back, and what they built from nothing in the cities of the New World through sheer unmovable Irish refusal to be finished. That is what this video is about. 111 years after Patrick Kennedy steps off that boat, and his great-grandson stands on the steps of the United States Capitol and becomes the 35th President of the United States. Patrick will be dead at 35. He will never know. This is the story of the Great Irish Famine, the hunger, the ships, the hatred, the survival, and how a people who lost everything came to America and built something that changed the world forever. Let's begin. To properly understand this story, you have to understand what the Great Irish Famine was. Ireland, 1844. This country is not the romantic postcard version. Rolling green hills, fiddles, pints of Guinness. That image came later, built by nostalgia and distance. The real Ireland, the one Patrick Kennedy grew up in, is something harder and more alive than that. It is a place of extraordinary density. 8.5 million people on an island the size of Indiana. More people per square mile than almost anywhere in Europe. And most of them, the Catholic Irish. and the ones whose families had worked this land for centuries own none of it. The land belongs to English and Anglo-Irish Protestant landlords, many of whom have never set foot in Ireland and never intend to. They collect rent through agents. The tenant farmers pay what they can. When they can't pay, they go. Patrick Kennedy's family has been on their patch of Wexford for as long as anyone can remember. They grow potatoes. They keep a pig. They pay rent to a man they have never met. This is not unusual. This is Ireland. What is unusual, what visitors to Ireland in the 1830s and 1840s consistently remark upon, what strikes them before anything else, is the life, the sheer, stubborn, improbable vitality of Irish communities operating inside conditions that would seem to preclude vitality. The music that comes out of these cottages at night, the storytelling, Seanchaí, the Irish call them, the keepers of the old stories, men and women who can hold a room for hours with nothing but their voice and their memory. The language itself, Irish, not English, a language that has been suppressed and marginalized for 2 centuries of colonial rule and is still, in the west and south of the island, the language people dream in. The Catholic faith. So deep it is almost geological. The priest is not just a spiritual figure. He is the most educated man in the community, the one who reads the letters, writes the documents, and mediates the disputes. The church is where you mark every moment that matters. Birth, marriage, death, first communion, the whole architecture of a life. And the potato. By 1845, roughly 3 million Irish people, the poorest third of the population, depend on the potato for virtually everything they eat. This sounds desperate. It is not quite what it sounds like. The Irish potato, the lumper variety, is extraordinarily nutritious. When eaten with a little milk or buttermilk, it provides almost everything a human body needs. Children raised on it are healthy. Adults working brutal physical labor on it have the energy to work. It is not a glamorous food. It is a food that works. 1 acre, 1 family, 1 year. That is what the potato makes possible on a tiny plot of rented land with no margin and no backup. There is no backup. That is the thing to hold on to. That is the fact that turns what comes next from a natural disaster into something closer to a catastrophe of arithmetic. There is no backup crop, no savings, no safety net beyond the workhouse, which is the last place anyone wants to go. The potato is not one option among many. It is the only option, and it has worked for 200 years, and there is no reason, in the autumn of 1844, to believe it will not keep working. Patrick Kennedy is 26 years old in 1844. He has a wife. He has a trade, barrel making, which means he earns a little money beyond what the land provides, which puts him marginally ahead. He knows everyone in his townland. He speaks Irish at home and enough English to get by. On a Sunday after Mass, the men stand outside the church and talk. The women talk longer. The children run. It is not a comfortable life. It is a life. Then one morning in September 1845, a farmer in County Cork walks out to his field in the morning and stops. Something is wrong with the smell. The smell is the first thing, before the blackening, before the stalks collapse, before anyone understands what they're looking at. The smell arrives, sweet and wrong, like something rotting from the inside out. Farmers who have worked the same fields their entire lives, whose fathers worked them, whose children will work them. These people know every smell the land makes. They know wet soil after rain. They know the clean green smell of healthy growth. They know the difference between a plant dying naturally and something else. This is something else. Within days, the stalks are black. Within a week, the potatoes underneath, the ones that looked fine, that would have fed a family through winter, are gray mush. Liquid. The rot spreads faster than anyone can respond to it, field to field, county to county, carried on the wind in spores so small they're invisible. A water mold called Phytophthora infestans, though nobody has that name for it yet. All they have is the smell and the blackened fields and the sinking understanding that something has gone very wrong. By the end of that first autumn, roughly half of Ireland's potato crop is gone. People tell themselves it's one bad year. It happens. There will be other years. The following autumn, the blight comes back. Worse. 3/4 of the crop this time. The west of Ireland, Connaught, Mayo, Galway, even the most densely populated and the most dependent on the potato, begins to starve in earnest. Not the comfortable hunger of a lean season, the other kind, the kind that starts in your stomach and moves outward until it is all you are. People eat whatever they can find, nettles, roots, the bark off trees. A family in County Mayo is found dead in their cottage, the youngest child still holding a fistful of grass she'd pulled from outside the door. And by the winter of 1847, the year people will come to call Black 47, the year the story becomes almost unspeakable, the country has nothing left. Not because the blight is worse than the year before, because 2 years of hunger have burned through every reserve. The pig is gone. The furniture is gone. The seed potatoes, the ones you saved to plant next year, are gone, eaten in desperation over the winter. There is nothing to fall back on because everything has already been fallen back on. The workhouses are overwhelmed. These institutions, built to house the destitute in exchange for labor, designed deliberately to be unpleasant so that only the truly desperate would enter them, are now packed beyond any capacity they were built for. Hundreds holding thousands. Typhus moves through them. Dysentery. Relapsing fever, which people call famine fever, because it follows the hunger everywhere it goes. The staff bury the dead in mass graves and go back inside and do it again the next day. A Quaker named William Forster travels through Connaught in early 1847 distributing relief. He is not a dramatic man. He writes home to his family in plain, careful language because that is how he is. He writes, "I have seen enough to know that the distress is as great as any that has ever been described. He has run out of adequate language, and he knows it, and he keeps going anyway." Now here's the thing that people know and don't quite believe when they first hear it. Throughout the famine, all of it, every year, through the worst of Black 47, food is leaving Ireland. Grain, livestock, butter, eggs, sailing out of Irish ports on British ships, bound for English markets, because the landlords need their rents paid, and their rents are paid in cash, and cash comes from selling what the land produces. The land is producing. The people who work it are starving. And these two facts exist simultaneously, and the British government, operating under the near-religious conviction that interfering with market forces would do more harm than good, allows it to continue. There are relief programs. The British civil servant overseeing famine relief, a man named Charles Trevelyan, is not cruel in any simple sense. He works long hours. He corresponds tirelessly. He also believes, with complete certainty, and that the famine is an act of divine providence, a correction of Irish overpopulation, and that too much government intervention would prevent the necessary correction from occurring. He writes this down. It is in the record. A priest named Father Theobald Matthew has spent the previous decade walking every county of Ireland, leading a temperance movement. He knows this country the way few people do, its roads, its people, its capacity for endurance. And in a letter written in the summer of 1847, he describes walking a road in Cork and passing, in the space of a few miles, a dozen bodies. People who lay down and did not get up. He writes only, "I am haunted." He doesn't elaborate. He doesn't need to. 1 million people die, 1 in 8. Not in a war, not in a plague, from hunger. On an island that was, the entire time, exporting food. And through all of it, the question every family in Ireland is asking is the same. Do we stay or do we go? Staying means the workhouse or the roadside or the hope that next year is different, and next year has not been different for 3 years. Going means a boat. Going means leaving the graves of your parents, the field your grandfather cleared, the language that lives in your mouth and nowhere else on earth. Going means an ocean crossing that people are not always coming back from. Patrick Kennedy looks at his son. He is going. And in that decision, made not in defeat but in the specific, with ferocious Irish refusal to lie down, something begins, because defeat is already on that road in Cork. Defeat is a fistful of grass. Getting on the boat is something else entirely. And onto the ship toward America he sails. They called them coffin ships, not officially, just what people called them, the way you name a thing that keeps proving itself. One ship that summer, called the Elizabeth and Sarah, leaves the west coast of Ireland carrying 276 people. The manifest says 212. It has 8,700 gallons of water on board when the law requires 12,532. It distributes 0 food rations for the entire crossing, not 1 pound, for 5 weeks on the Atlantic. This is not a story of one exceptionally bad ship. This is what the cheapest passage looks like when 1 million people need to leave, and the shipping companies know it. The people below deck cannot stand upright. The ceiling is too low. They lie in wooden berths, stacked 2 and 3 high, now so tightly packed that turning over means negotiating with the body beside you. The hatch opens when the weather permits. When it doesn't, the air below is whatever the air below has become after days of 200 sick and frightened people breathing it. There is no adequate way to describe what that smells like. The people who survived these crossings generally did not try. Dysentery moves through the holds like it has somewhere to be. Typhus, cholera. A ship's doctor, if there is one, which can do almost nothing. There is no treatment for cholera anywhere in the world in 1847, let alone on a moving ship in the middle of the Atlantic. When someone dies, and people die on nearly every crossing, they go over the side. The ship keeps moving. It has to keep moving. In a single year, 1 in 5 Irish people who sail for Canada die before they arrive or shortly after landing. 1 in 5. On a route people chose because it was cheaper than sailing directly to New York. A few shillings less, the difference between going and not going when you have almost nothing left. And still they come. 1 million of them in a decade, men with trades and men without. Women traveling alone because their husbands are already dead. Children who have never seen a body of water larger than a river, standing on a dock looking at the Atlantic. Old people who know they will probably not survive the crossing and get on anyway, because dying on a ship is not the same as dying in a ditch in Cork, and they have decided that distinction matters. They come because the alternative is already settled. Because the road is already full of people who waited too long. Because whatever is on the other side of that water, and they have heard things, not all of them good, is at least a question. And a question is more than what Ireland is offering them now. 5 weeks, 6, 8, if the weather turns. Most of them survive it. They arrive thin and sick and wearing everything they own. They walk down the gangplanks onto the docks of Boston and New York and Quebec, and they are standing on solid ground for the first time in weeks, and they are alive. Patrick Kennedy arrives in Boston in the late summer of 1848. Behind him, an ocean. Behind that ocean, a country still dying. In front of him, it's a city. He doesn't know yet what that city thinks of him. He is about to find out. Boston in 1848 is a city of about 115,000 people. By 1850, it will be closer to 137,000. The difference, the 22,000, is almost entirely Irish. They pour into the cheapest neighborhoods, the North End, Fort Hill, the warren of streets around the waterfront where the rents are lowest because the conditions are worst. Buildings that were never designed to hold the number of people now living in them. 12, into 15, 20 people to a room, no running water. Privies shared between dozens of families in the same courtyard, overflowing in summer, frozen in winter. Cholera moves through these streets with the confidence of something that knows it is welcome. Patrick Kennedy finds a room in East Boston. It is not a good room. It is a room. He is paying rent to a landlord he has never met, which is a situation he recognizes from Wexford, except that in Wexford, the land had the decency to smell like something other than a sewer. He goes looking for work. He is a barrel maker, a real skill, useful in a port city, and he knows it. He walks the waterfront, the warehouses, the cooperatives along the harbor. He asks. He is told no, or he is told to come back, or he is simply looked at in a way that requires no words. He has seen that look before on the face of the landlord's agent back in Wexford. It is the look of a man who has already decided what you are worth before you opened your mouth. Patrick Kennedy knows how to absorb that look and keep walking. He learned it young. He walks until someone says yes. The first thing he notices, the thing every Irish arrival notices, the thing that becomes so familiar it stops registering after a while, are the signs in the shop windows, in the newspaper listings, on the boarding house doors. No Irish need apply, not occasional, not isolated, systematic. Documented in thousands of job listings, housing notices, domestic service advertisements across Boston, New York, Philadelphia, Baltimore. A formal, printed, public declaration that these people, who have just survived a famine and a coffin ship and the death of everything they knew, are not wanted here either. It is not illegal. It is not even controversial. It is just the way things are. Now, a woman named Bridie Moran arrives in New York in the spring of 1849 with 2 children and the address of a cousin written on a piece of paper she has kept dry through the entire crossing. The cousin is gone, moved, no forwarding address. She finds a room on Mulberry Street, $2 a month, shared with another family. She applies for work as a domestic servant, the most available work for Irish women, and is turned away from 11 houses before the 12th takes her on at $2 a week. She sends half of it home to her mother in Clare. Her mother is dead by the time the money arrives, but her younger brother uses it to buy food through the winter. The Irish land at the absolute bottom of American society, below every other European immigrant group. The Germans who arrive in the same years are largely Protestant, largely skilled, largely literate in English. They move into trades and businesses within a generation. The Irish are Catholic, largely unskilled, arriving in numbers so overwhelming that the cities receiving them have no infrastructure and no particular desire to build any. In New York, they settle in the 5 Points, a neighborhood in Lower Manhattan that by 1850 is the most densely populated place in the Western world. The buildings are so old and so badly maintained that the floors of the upper stories sometimes collapse into the floors below. The streets flood when it rains. Tuberculosis is endemic. Infant mortality runs at rates that people living inside it have stopped finding shocking because there is no emotional register left for it. A man named Thomas Shaughnessy from County Galway arrives in New York in 1850, finds work as a laborer on the docks, and lives in a cellar apartment on Worth Street with 7 other men from Galway. The ceiling is so low he cannot stand upright in it. He works 6 days a week. On Sunday, he goes to Mass at St. Peter's on Barclay Street because the priest there is from Galway, and the Mass feels like something he recognizes. By 1855, he has moved out of the cellar. He has a proper room. He is still a laborer, but he is a laborer with savings, which is not nothing, which is, in fact, everything. And into this city, in the spring of 1847, comes a letter. Not to the Irish, to the Choctaw Nation in what is now Oklahoma. The Choctaw have been in Oklahoma for 16 years. They arrived, not by choice. In the winter of 1831, The United States government forced them off their ancestral lands in Mississippi and Alabama and marched them west, hundreds of miles through winter cold, with insufficient food, with disease moving through the columns of people who had no idea where they were going or why. Thousands died on that march. The Choctaw have a name for it. They know in their bodies and in their still raw grief exactly what it feels like to be starved off your land by a government that has decided your survival is inconvenient. In the spring of 1847, they read about Ireland. They take up a collection. Among themselves, people who are still poor, still rebuilding, still carrying the weight of what was done to them just 16 years before. They collect $170 and send it to Ireland. To strangers, across an ocean, because they recognize something in the newspaper descriptions of Irish families dying in their fields that lives in their own memory. They have felt this. They know what this is. $170, roughly $5,000 in today's money, from people who did not have it to spare. There is no record of a formal decision, no minutes of a meeting, no document explaining the reasoning, just the donation. Not just the money crossing an ocean from one devastated people to another because one of them looked at the other and saw not a foreign problem, but a human one. The Irish relief committees recorded it and moved on because there was too much suffering to pause on any single act of grace. But it should be paused on. Because in the middle of the famine, the coffin ships, the signs in the windows, the bottom of American society, someone saw the Irish. Not as a burden, not as a threat, as people, and acted accordingly. The Irish did not forget. In 2018, when the Navajo Nation and the Hopi people were devastated by COVID-19, Irish people around the world raised over $5 million for them. The donors cited the Choctaw gift specifically, 171 years later. The circle closed. But that is later. In 1849, in 1850, in 1852, the Irish are still at the bottom, still navigating the signs, still finding the rooms no one else wants, still building. The opposition is getting organized. In the early 1850s, a political movement emerges from the nativist anxiety building in American cities since the Irish started arriving. They call themselves the American Party. Everyone else calls them the Know-Nothings, because when asked about their organization, members are instructed to say they know nothing. Their platform is not subtle. Ban Catholics from public office, require 21 years of residency before any immigrant can become a citizen, and to remove foreign-born people from all government positions. In 1854, they win the governorship of Massachusetts. They carry the state legislature. They elect mayors across the country. They are, for a terrifying few years, one of the most powerful political forces in America. In the state with the largest Irish population in the country, running explicitly on a platform of keeping the Irish out of public life. A man named Seamus Brennan, a laborer in Charlestown, Massachusetts, goes to vote in the 1854 election and is turned away from the polling place by know-nothing operatives who challenge his citizenship papers. He has been a citizen for 3 years. He walks home. He tells his wife. She tells him to go back tomorrow and register again, and not to let them see that it worked. He goes back. This is, in miniature, what the Irish do. The draft riots of 1863 are the darkest chapter in Irish-American history and deserve to be named plainly. When the Union Army institutes conscription with a provision allowing wealthy men to buy exemption for $300, more than a year's wages for most Irish laborers, something breaks in New York. 4 days of violence, buildings burned, people killed. The worst violence directed at Black New Yorkers who have nothing to do with the draft and everything to do with the specific ugly mechanics of what happens when desperate people are handed someone to blame by people with an interest in the blaming. It is not excusable. It happened. The Irish community, its clergy, its civic leaders, its newspaper editors, condemns it in the aftermath, publicly and without equivocation. They are trying to build something. They know what burning things down costs. And then there is Archbishop John Hughes. He comes from County Tyrone at 20 with nothing. He works as a gardener, studies for the priesthood, rises until he is the most powerful Catholic figure in the United States. New Yorkers call him Dagger John because he signs his name with a cross like a dagger, and because there is something about him that suggests a man who has decided, quietly and permanently, that he will not be moved. When know-nothing mobs threaten Catholic churches in New York, when the rumors spread that the churches will burn, Hughes surrounds every Catholic church in the city with thousands of Irish men. Armed, silent. He sends word to the mayor. If one Catholic church burns, he says, the city will become a second Moscow. The churches do not burn. A man who arrived with nothing in a city that put signs in its windows, who became powerful enough to protect his entire community with a single sentence that the most powerful city in America chose to believe. He is not waiting for permission. None of them are. Here is what the Irish had when they arrived: each other. That's not sentiment, that's strategy. A people with no money, no political power, no land, no welcome, no legal recourse, no safety net of any kind. The only resource they have is the person standing next to them. And the Irish, it turns out, are extraordinarily good at turning that resource into something structural. Patrick Kennedy is one of the men who builds it. Not metaphorically, literally. He gives what he can on Sundays to the building fund at Most Holy Redeemer in East Boston, the way every Irish laborer in every Irish neighborhood gives what he can, which is never much and always something. He knows the priest by name. The priest knows his children's names. On Sunday mornings after Mass, the men stand outside and talk the way they stood outside churches in Wexford, in Mayo, in Cork. The same conversation in a different city, in a language some of them are still learning to feel comfortable in. It is not Ireland, but it is something. It is the closest thing to Ireland they are going to get. It starts with the parish. Not the church as a building, the parish as a system. In every Irish neighborhood in every American city in the 1850s and 1860s, the parish becomes the thing that holds everything together: school, employment network, mutual aid society, social club, political organizing unit, the place where you are known by name when the rest of the city would prefer not to know you exist. The priest knows who needs work. He knows who has a room to rent. He knows whose husband just died and whose daughter needs a reference and whose son is getting into trouble. He is the node through which the whole community flows. They build these parishes out of almost nothing. Collections of pennies from people who have almost no pennies. Churches that go up brick by brick over decades, funded by the same laborers who work 6 days a week and hand something over on the 7th. By 1860, there are dozens of Irish Catholic parishes in Boston alone. But by 1880, the American Catholic Church is, functionally, an Irish institution. Its bishops, its culture, its organizational DNA almost entirely shaped by the people who arrived starving 30 years before. A woman named Nora Feeney arrives in Boston in 1851 from County Mayo with nothing but the address of a parish written on a scrap of paper given to her by a priest in Galway who had never been to America but had heard things. She finds the parish. The parish finds her a room, then work, then introduces her to a man from Mayo who becomes her husband. They have 4 children. She never leaves Boston. She dies in 1901 in a house she owns, on a street she has lived on for 40 years, surrounded by people who knew her name. That scrap of paper, that parish, that network, this is how it works. The parish is the foundation, but it is not the whole structure. The Irish are also, with a speed that surprises everyone including themselves, learning to play American politics. And Tammany Hall in New York is the most famous example and the most complicated one. It is corrupt. That needs to be said plainly. The machine politics of the Tammany Democrats involve graft and patronage, and the kind of arrangements that would not survive scrutiny in daylight. But it is also, for the Irish, the first lever they have ever had on anything. Tammany delivers votes, and Tammany receives jobs in return: city contracts, police appointments, fire department positions, clerk positions. The whole apparatus of municipal employment that the Irish can access through the machine when they cannot access it any other way. William Tweed, the most notorious Tammany boss, is not Irish. But the men who run the machine at the ward level, who knock on doors and know every family on every block, and turn out the vote, and collect the favors, and distribute the patronage. Those men are almost all Irish by the 1870s. And what they are doing, underneath the corruption, is building political infrastructure, teaching a community that has never had political power what political power feels like and how to use it. The lessons outlast the corruption. The corruption eventually gets cleaned up. The political infrastructure remains. By the 1880s, Irish political bosses control the Democratic Party machinery in Boston, New York, Chicago, and a dozen other cities. Not because they are uniquely corrupt. Every ethnic group that comes after them uses the same machine. Because they got there first, and they understood, from the workhouses and the landlord system and the centuries of colonial rule, that power is not given. It is built, piece by piece, ward by ward, election by election, favor by favor. A man named Martin Loughran arrives in New York from Donegal in 1853 with a letter of introduction to a Tammany ward captain from a cousin who had arrived 5 years before. He starts as a laborer. Within 3 years, he is a poll watcher. Within 10, he is a ward healer, which means he knows every voter on 12 city blocks by name and makes sure they turn out. He never holds elected office. He is more powerful than most people who do. His son becomes a city clerk. His grandson becomes a state assemblyman. The Loughrans are not famous. There are 10,000 families like them. Then there is the police force. In city after city, the Irish move into municipal employment with a focused efficiency that looks, in retrospect, almost like a plan. The police department, the fire department, the civil service, the post office. These are not glamorous positions, they are stable ones. A city job means a salary that doesn't disappear when the economy turns. It means a pension. It means something to pass on. The Irish understand, from generations of having nothing stable, exactly how much stability is worth. By the 1880s, Irish immigrants and their sons dominate the police forces of Boston, New York, and Chicago. If the Irish cop becomes a cultural fixture, the brogue, the beat, the particular combination of authority and neighborhood intimacy that comes from a man policing the streets where he grew up. It is not a coincidence. It is the result of thousands of individual decisions by men who understood that a badge was a ladder and climbed it. And then, in a place no one was expecting, comes the evidence. In a storage room in Lower Manhattan, in the archives of the Immigrant Savings Bank, there are ledgers, thousands of them, account records for Irish immigrants who opened savings accounts in the 1850s and 1860s. The bank was founded specifically to serve the Irish community. Its tellers spoke Irish, its founders were Irish. Its entire reason for existing was to give famine immigrants somewhere safe to put whatever they managed to save. Those ledgers sat untouched for 150 years. A historian named Tyler Anbinder opened them. What he found rewrote what America thought it knew about the famine Irish. The story that had calcified into received wisdom, that the famine immigrants were locked in permanent poverty, that they were the exception to the American dream rather than its proof, was wrong. The ledgers showed something different. Account after account of men and women who arrived with nothing and within 5 years had savings. Within 10 had moved out of the tenements. Within a generation had children in school, in trades, in professions. Not all of them. Not easily, not without cost, but enough of them and fast enough that the pattern is unmistakable. Patrick Harrington from County Cork opens an account in 1853 with $3. By 1861, he has 240. He is a laborer the entire time. He never gets a better job. He just saves every week whatever is left after the rent and the food, and the small amount he sends home. So $240 in 1861 is enough to move his family out of the tenement and into a proper apartment. His daughter marries a man who owns a small grocery. His grandson goes to Fordham. $3 to Fordham in 2 generations. By the time the Civil War ends, the Irish have been in America for 20 years. A full generation has grown up in these cities, in these parishes, in these political wards. They speak English without an accent. They have never seen Ireland. What they have inherited from their parents and grandparents is not the trauma directly. They are too young for that. But the residue of it, the specific habits of survival that famine and crossing and rejection deposit in a people and that don't leave when the immediate danger passes, the doggedness, the dark humor that treats catastrophe as material rather than cause for despair. Yet the loyalty to family and neighborhood so fierce it sometimes looks like clannishness to outsiders who don't understand what it costs to build. The chip on the shoulder, permanent, specific, worn not with bitterness, but with a kind of wary pride that says, we know what people thought of us, and we know what we did about it. Mary Kenny is born in Hannibal, Missouri, in 1864, the daughter of famine immigrants. Her father is a laborer. She goes to work at 14 as a bookbinder, and by her late 20s, she is organizing women workers in Chicago with a tenacity that exhausts everyone around her. In 1892, she becomes the first woman ever appointed as a general organizer by the American Federation of Labor. She co-founds the National Women's Trade Union League. She spends her life fighting for the rights of working people in language that is direct, specific, and entirely without self-pity. She is the granddaughter of people who were told they would never be real Americans. She becomes one of the people who defines what America owes its workers, one generation. That is the speed of the Irish transformation when given any foothold at all. Not because the Irish are exceptional, because people given a foothold after being told they would never have one tend to use it with a particular intensity. By the turn of the century, by 1900, 50 years after the famine ships, only 15% of Irish American men are still unskilled laborers. 15%. Yeah, from 100% who arrived with nothing. The rest are policemen and firemen and ward bosses and civil servants and small business owners and lawyers and priests and teachers and organizers. They are in every layer of American city life, holding it together from the inside, in jobs and roles that most Americans have stopped noticing are Irish, because the Irish have been doing them for so long. They are no longer at the bottom. They are not yet at the top. But they are moving, and they have been moving steadily, stubbornly, in that specific Irish way since the day they walked down the gangplank and saw the signs in the windows and decided, quietly, collectively, without making a speech about it, that the signs were wrong. Patrick Kennedy, the Irish immigrant whom we met at the beginning of this video, the barrel maker from Wexford, the man who got on the boat in 1848 with one bag and a 3-year-old son, dies on November 22, 1858, cholera. He is 35 years old. He has been in America for 10 years. He lives in East Boston, in a neighborhood that is almost entirely Irish, on a street where everyone knows his name and his trade and which parish he belongs to. He has 3 children. His wife Bridget will outlive him by decades. He never sees any of what is coming. Not his son's saloon, not his grandson's Harvard degree. Not the photograph that will one day hang in every Irish-American household in the country. A young man in a dark suit on the steps of the Capitol, hand raised, the whole world watching. Patrick Kennedy gets 10 years in America, and then he is gone. He is buried in East Boston in a grave that still exists. You can visit it. It is not a famous grave. It is a small headstone in a Catholic cemetery, and one of 10,000 identical headstones in 10,000 identical Catholic cemeteries across the eastern seaboard. The kind of grave that marks a man who worked and paid rent and raised children and died before his time and was mourned by the people on his street and then, slowly, forgotten by everyone except his family. That is most people. That is almost all people. But hold it for a moment. A man who made the most consequential decision of his family's history in a moment of desperation on a dock in Wexford, who spent 10 years building what he could in a city that didn't want him, who died at 35 of a disease that killed poor people in crowded neighborhoods, having never traveled more than a few miles from the waterfront where he landed. He could not see the ark because he was inside it. His son, Patrick Joseph Kennedy, PJ, everyone calls him, is born in East Boston in 1858, the same year his father dies. He grows up fatherless in the neighborhood his father helped build, in the parish his father helped fund penny by penny on Sunday mornings. He leaves school at 14 because there is no money and no father and no alternative. And he goes to work on the docks the way Irish boys in East Boston go to work on the docks, because the docks are there, and the docks will take you and you do what is available. He saves, slowly, carefully, the way his father saved and his father's neighbors saved, the Immigrants Savings Bank on Chambers Street, the ledger with his name in it, the column of deposits that grows incrementally over years of 6-day weeks and careful living. By his mid-20s, he has enough to buy a small saloon in Haymarket Square. The saloon is not just a business. In an Irish neighborhood in 1880s Boston, the saloon is an institution. PJ. Then Kennedy is the man who knows everyone who comes through the door, their family situations, their employment troubles, their landlord disputes, who owes whom and who is owed. He extends credit when times are thin. He is owed favors by half the ward. The saloon becomes 2 saloons. The saloons become a liquor importing business. The business becomes political capital. P.J. Kennedy becomes a ward boss, then a state representative, then a state senator. He is not a famous politician. He operates in the back rooms, in the specific unglamorous machinery of Boston Democratic politics, where the real decisions happen before anyone sits down in a formal meeting. He understands power the way his father understood barrels. From the inside, practically, without sentimentality about it. His father came off a boat with nothing. PJ dies in 1929 with a son at Harvard. That son is Joseph Patrick Kennedy, and he is something new. Not the immigrant's son making his way carefully up through the available channels. Something more impatient than that, more expansive, shaped by the specific ambition of a man who grew up watching his father operate near the top of Irish Boston and understood that Irish Boston was not the ceiling. Joe Kennedy graduates Harvard in 1912. He is 24 years old, and he wants things that Irish Catholics are not supposed to want yet. Not supposed to want in the sense that the doors are not fully open, that the old Protestant establishment of Boston still controls the banks and the social clubs, and the quiet understandings about who belongs where. Joe Kennedy walks up to those doors and pushes. He becomes the youngest bank president in Massachusetts at 25. He moves into stock market speculation and makes a fortune in the 1920s, in part because he understands from his father's backroom education how games are played and who is playing them. He moves to Hollywood and runs a studio. He comes back east and enters the orbit of Franklin Roosevelt, who appoints him the first chairman of the Securities and Exchange Commission. The logic being that it takes a speculator to regulate speculators, which is either cynical or brilliant, depending on how you look at it. Then, Roosevelt appoints him ambassador to the court of St. James. The Court of St. James is the formal name for the United States ambassadorship to the United Kingdom. The ambassador presents his credentials to the British monarch. He represents America in the capital of the empire that governed Ireland for 800 years, that owned the land Patrick Kennedy's family worked, and that exported food from a starving island while 1 million people died. The grandson of a famine barrel maker standing in front of the British crown, representing the most powerful nation on earth. Joe Kennedy's ambassadorship ends badly. He becomes pessimistic about Britain's chances against Nazi Germany and says so publicly in ways that damage his relationship with Roosevelt and effectively end his political career. He spends the rest of his life building his family's political career instead. He decides, with a clarity that overrides everything else, that his sons will go where he cannot. He pushes them. The word his children use later is relentless. He is present in their lives the way a force of nature is present. Not always comfortable, not always welcome, but impossible to ignore and impossible to escape. He has 4 sons. Yet Joseph Jr. is killed in 1944 when his plane explodes over the English Channel on a volunteer bombing mission. He was the one Joe Sr. had designated for the presidency. The plan doesn't change, it transfers. John Fitzgerald Kennedy, Jack, is 35 years old when his brother dies. He has a bad back and a war record, and a father who has reorganized the entire weight of his ambition around his second son's future. He enters politics in 1946, wins a House seat, wins a Senate seat, and by the late 1950s is the most famous Catholic politician in America, which is a category that still carries, in American public life, a specific and persistent suspicion. The suspicion is old. It goes back to the Know-Nothings, back further than that, back to the foundational Protestant identity of the American Republic. Catholics, in this view, owe a primary allegiance not to the United States, but to Rome. The Pope is a foreign sovereign. A Catholic president would be, at some level, an agent of a foreign power. This argument had been used to keep Catholics out of public office since the colonial era. It had been used to justify the No Irish Need Apply signs. It had powered the Know-Nothing sweep of Massachusetts in 1854. It was still, in 1960, a living argument made by serious people in serious publications. In September of 1960, Kennedy addresses the Greater Houston Ministerial Association, a gathering of Protestant ministers who have raised the Catholic question directly and publicly. He stands before them and says, with a directness that his grandfather P.J. would have recognized as tactical, and his great-grandfather Patrick would not have lived to see the need for, I am not the Catholic candidate for president. I am the Democratic Party's candidate for president who happens to be Catholic. If the room is not fully convinced, the country is not fully convinced. But something shifts. On the morning of November 8, 1960, 70 million Americans go to the polls. The election is about many things: the Cold War, the economy, a young senator against a sitting vice president, television debates that have just changed American politics permanently. But underneath all of that, older and more personal than policy, thus is the question that has followed the Irish since the first coffin ship docked in Boston Harbor. Do you belong here? Are you really American? Can one of you actually, genuinely, not as an exception that proves the rule, but as a fact about what this country is, lead this country? The answer comes in at 112,827 votes out of 68 million cast, a margin so thin that it takes days to confirm and is disputed for years afterward. But it holds. On January 20th, 1961, John Fitzgerald Kennedy stands on the steps of the Capitol. The temperature is 7 degrees above zero. The sun is out. He is 43 years old, the youngest man ever elected to the presidency, and he is not wearing a hat, which becomes a detail people remember for reasons that have something to do with youth and something to do with the specific image of a man who seems genuinely unafraid of the cold. He delivers an address that people will memorize for generations. "Ask not what your country can do for you," he says. "Ask what you can do for your country." The great-grandson of a man who arrived at this country asking only not to die in it. Now standing at its center, asking what he can give back. 111 years. Patrick Kennedy's grave in East Boston to the steps of the Capitol. The distance between those two places is not very far in miles. In everything else, it is one of the longest journeys in American history. But here's the thing about the Kennedys. They are the famous version of an Irish-American story that happened 10,000 times without anyone famous in it. Behind the Kennedys, invisible and enormous, are the Irish-American families nobody made documentaries about. The Lafrans of Donegal, the Ward Heeler's family, the grandson who became a state assemblyman and whose name appears in no history book. The Fannies of Mayo, the woman with the scrap of paper and the parish address, who died in 1901 in a house she owned on a street she had lived on for 40 years. Patrick Harrington of Cork, who opened a savings account with $3 in 1853 and whose grandson went to Fordham. Bridie Moran turned away from 11 houses before the 12th took her on, sending half her wages home to a mother already dead. These people did not make history in the way that gets recorded. They made it in the way that actually matters, one decision at a time, one saved dollar at a time. One child sent to school at a time, one Sunday collection at a time, one election turned out at a time. They built the Irish-American world that the Kennedys rose through. Without them, there is no P.J. Kennedy Saloon, no Joe Kennedy's Harvard, no Jack Kennedy's inauguration. The Kennedys are the tip of something vast. 40 million Americans today claim Irish ancestry. 40 million. They are everywhere in American life. The doctors and the cops and the teachers and the politicians and the priests and the laborers and the writers. So thoroughly woven into the fabric of this country that most Americans have stopped noticing the Irish thread running through everything. It is there. It has been there since the first exhausted family walked down the gangplank into a city that didn't want them and decided, without making a speech about it, that they were staying anyway. Patrick Kennedy could not see any of this. He died at 35 in a tenement in East Boston with a trade and a family and a headstone that does not say anything about what he started. He didn't need to see it. He just needed to get on the boat. There is a dock in Wexford. A man is standing on it in 1848 with one bag and a 3-year-old son and the specific, unromantic knowledge that the ground has failed and the only move left is forward. He is 30 years old. He has never been more than 20 miles from the village where he was born. He is about to cross an ocean on a ship everyone knows is overcrowded and badly provisioned and people are dying on. He gets on anyway. That decision, that specific, unspectacular, completely ordinary act of refusing to be finished, did not end on that dock. It didn't end when Patrick Kennedy died in East Boston in 1858. It didn't end when the famine generation aged and died and their children grew up speaking English without an accent and stopped thinking of themselves as immigrants. It went into the people, not as a story told at dinner tables, though sometimes it was that too, as something more cellular than a story, as the specific way a people move through difficulty, the posture they take toward it, the tools they reach for, the things they refuse to do even when doing them would be easier. You know these things. If you have Irish blood in you, you have felt them without necessarily knowing where they came from, the doggedness first. Patrick Kennedy on that dock knew the ship was dangerous. He got on. The Irish in Boston knew the signs in the windows said no. They kept walking. Archbishop Hughes knew the mobs were coming for the churches. He put men around them and sent a message to the mayor that the city believed. Every single one of these moments is the same moment. A person or a people confronted with a signal that says, stop, deciding that the signal is wrong. That is not stubbornness in the pejorative sense. It is a trained, inherited, proven refusal to accept the verdict of a bad situation. The Irish did not develop this quality in comfortable circumstances. They developed it across centuries of colonial rule and then across the specific crucible of the famine and the crossing and the signs and the know-nothings and the draft riots and every other thing that said, "You are not wanted. You will not make it. This is not for you." Every time they decided the signal was wrong. Every time they were right. The dark humor next. In the workhouses of Black 47, when the staff were burying the dead in mass graves and going back inside and doing it again the next day, there is documented evidence of this in letters and diaries and the accounts of relief workers singing. Not in defiance, not as a statement, just because that is what Irish people do when things are unsurvivable. They find the thing that is still human inside the catastrophe and they hold on to it. The joke is not denial. The Irish are not a people who pretend bad things aren't happening. They have never had that luxury. The bad things have always been too present and too specific to pretend away. The joke is something else. It is the refusal to let the bad thing have the last word. It is the insistence that even inside the worst situation, you are still a person with a sense of humor and a sense of the absurd, and that person cannot be taken from you, no matter what else is. In a people who survived what the Irish survived without developing either self-pity or the capacity for dark laughter would be a different people entirely. They developed both, and they are, in the end, the same thing. Two expressions of the same refusal to be defined by suffering, the loyalty. In the 5 Points in the East Boston tenements, in the parish halls, in the political wards, the Irish built something that outsiders sometimes mistook for clannishness. Why do the Irish stick so close together? Why do they take care of their own so fiercely? Why does the network of obligation and reciprocity run so deep in Irish communities, generations after the original conditions that created it have passed? Because the person next to you was once literally all you had. Nora Feeney from Mayo arrived in Boston with nothing but a parish address on a scrap of paper, and the parish found her a room and then work, and then a husband. Thomas Shaughnessy from Galway survived his first years in New York because 7 men from Galway shared a cellar on Worth Street and looked after each other. Patrick Kennedy built his life inside a community that knew his name and his trade and his children's names, in a city that had put signs in its windows saying he was not wanted. The loyalty is not sentiment. It is the memory carried in the body long after the original emergency has passed of what it cost to need someone and what it meant when they showed up. The chip on the shoulder. This one is harder to trace and easier to feel. The Irish carry something, still, now in families whose last connection to Ireland is a great-great-grandparent they never met, that sits just below the surface. A watchfulness, a readiness, a slight, permanent bracing, as if waiting for something that probably won't come but might. It came from the know-nothings winning the governorship of Massachusetts on a platform of keeping the Irish out of public life. It came from the "No Irish Need Apply" signs that a man walked past every morning for years, looking for work that was legally available to him and practically withheld. It came from being told by organized political movements with actual electoral power that your faith made you a servant of a foreign power and your people could never be trusted with the responsibilities of citizenship. The Irish were told this for long enough and loudly enough that proving it wrong, comprehensively, irrefutably, with a president, didn't fully dissolve it. Something remained. Some part of the muscle memory that said, you know what they thought of you. You know what was said. Don't forget. That chip is not a wound that failed to heal. It is a scar that healed correctly, that kept the memory of the injury without keeping the incapacity. The Irish are not a bitter people. Bitterness is what happens when you can't move past what was done to you. The Irish moved past it. They just took the memory with them, because the memory is useful and the memory is honest, and the memory is part of who they are. Patrick Kennedy never gave a speech about any of this. He didn't write it down. He got on a boat in 1848 and worked for 10 years and died at 35 and left behind a wife and 3 children and a headstone that doesn't say anything except his name and his dates. What he also left behind, what he couldn't have known he was leaving, is harder to put on a headstone. A way of moving through the world, a set of tools for surviving the unsurvivable. A refusal passed down through generations like a genetic trait. To accept that something is finished just because it looks finished. His great-grandson stood on the steps of the Capitol and the whole world watched. Patrick Kennedy never knew. He didn't need to. He just needed to get on the boat. And he did. And now, it is yours. Not as a story you were told once and filed away. As a living thing. As a flame that was lit on a dock in Wexford in 1848 and passed from hand to hand across an ocean and a century and a half of American life and has arrived, still burning, with you. Patrick Kennedy carried it onto the ship. Bridget kept it burning through 10 years of East Boston tenements after he was gone. PJ carried it into the saloon and the ward and the State House. Joe carried it to Harvard and Hollywood and the Court of St. James. Jack carried it to the steps of the Capitol and raised his hand, and the whole world watched. And behind all of them, invisible, enormous, the real foundation of everything, 1 million Irish men and women carried it through the 5 points and the No Irish Need Apply signs and the Know Nothing years and the draft riots and the Sunday collections and the civil service exams and the $3 savings accounts and the children sent to school and the grandchildren sent further. They carried it so you wouldn't have to start from nothing. You are Irish American. That means something specific. It means you come from people who were told by famine, by ships, by signs and windows, by governments, by organized political movements with actual electoral power, that they were finished, and who looked at all of that and said, no, quietly, without making a speech, just no. It means you come from people who crossed the unsurvivable and built something on the other side that changed the world. It means the doggedness in you has a reason, the loyalty has a history, the dark humor has a source. The chip on the shoulder has a name. It has 1 million names, on 1 million headstones in 1 million Catholic cemeteries, and every one of them got on the boat. You are what they were building toward. Every sacrifice, every saved penny, every door walked past that said no, every child sent to school, every vote cast, every parish built from pennies, every generation that climbed so the next one could climb further, it was all pointing here, to you. Carry it forward. So carry it with everything they gave you. The stubbornness, the humor, the loyalty, the memory of what was overcome. Carry it the way they carried it, not as a burden, not as a wound, but as a flame. Because somewhere on a dock in Wexford, a 30-year-old man with 1 bag and a 3-year-old son looked out at an ocean he had never crossed and a country he had never seen and decided that the future was worth the crossing. He crossed it for you. Don't let the flame go out.